Alright guys, stop spinning your kunais, close the fade stream. In today's video, we're going to cover controller movement. I'm just playing. Obviously, Fade is insane, and I know a lot of us controller players want to emulate some of the best movement mechanics on mouse and keyboard. But in this video, we'll talk about what's possible, what's practical, and how to improve your movement on controller in Apex Legends. If you're new here, my channel centers around helping you guys improve at Apex. It has been a while since I made a controller movement guide, and Season 11 is right around the corner, so we need to get you ready for it. We're going to cover wall bouncing, zipline movement, super jumps, b-hopping, understanding angles, and much more. Let's get right into this. All right, real quick though, first we got to talk about why movement is useful in Apex. The number one reason to improve movement is to increase your skill gap and to learn to outplay your opponents more frequently with it. Movement can certainly give you an upper hand in a fight, and it can help keep you alive in situations that require it. Now, it is hard to have really good movement on controller just because of the nature of the input. We don't have as many binds as a keyboard, and we can't move as fast as a mouse. However, movement is not what everyone thinks it is. Sure, it can be flashy and look appealing to viewers, but in reality, the best players don't rely strictly on movement. They use a combination of movement, IQ, game sense, and aim. And if you lack in aim and IQ, forget about having cracked movement. Movement helps keep you alive by taking less damage and helps you surprise opponents with it, but aim is what ultimately will eliminate your opponents. Okay guys, the easiest way to learn how to wall bounce is to go into the firing range and practice on these gun racks. Now this is something that is fairly simple if you practice just a little bit. Now, important to note, my button layout for controller is button puncher, so my crouch is on my right stick and it is on toggle. If you play on paddles, you have a lot more flexibility in learning more movement mechanics, but for me, I just play on a normal Xbox controller, no paddles. I am on PC as well. The best way to do this is to go at an angle, slide, jump. When you jump, you want to jump somewhat of a distance away from whatever you're going to wall bounce on. Look towards the wall, jump again, and then look away from it. And you could also like spin off if you're trying to do a 180 on your opponent or whatever it may be. If you're going to slide down into something, always look at what your landing is because you can create more momentum. So it all depends on your purpose of your wall bounce. Are you trying to, break line of sight from your enemy and get away from them so you can heal and reload or whatever? Or are you trying to surprise them? If you're trying to surprise them, you can consider line of sight. Now, wall bouncing will only come in handy in certain situations, but it's incredibly important you get comfortable doing it so that when that opportunity presents itself, you can do it to your opponent. Here's an old clip of Kandyrew trying to wall bounce on me, but because I break line of sight, it basically achieves nothing for him, and then I just put him down. You always want to be conscious of trying to wall balance throughout your games if you're trying to practice it, because the more you practice it, the more secondhand it will be. I know people learn how to wall bounce, but then they never execute it in game because they're just not comfortable or used to doing it in game. So you got to constantly be trying to do it in game, and then in that right situation, you'll just do it and it'll work out. Hopefully. All right, let's move on to zip lines. We're going to cover how to quickly interact with them so you can navigate between floors easier and faster. Also cover how to zipline super jump. So in order to quickly interact with the zipline, I press X, then A, then X again. And in between, I have to turn my right stick to do a 180 essentially. Well, why is this useful? Well, instead of riding up the zipline and just being an easy target for your enemies, you can be a harder target to hit to navigate between each floor quicker. This will surprise your opponents, hopefully. And if you're in a disadvantaged fight, like a 1v2 or a 1v3, you can do this to try to isolate your opponents. You can do this so you can also buy time to heal, because a good player is always going to be repositioning in a fight. I'm going to cover this more later in the video though. You could also use it to close the gap to someone holding high ground, and it basically forces the fight up close if done correctly. And if you guys want to learn how to super jump, what you need to do is you need to press interact, which is X for me, and then spam jump twice. So X and AA really quickly. Also while turning 180 as well. Now, if you hit interact again, it will put you back onto the zipline so you'll launch onto the floor that you're floating above briefly. If you just do the super jump, you will still be in the zipline part of the building, and you can use it to peek the enemies on the floor that they're potentially holding. These are definitely more advanced movement techniques that will most likely take a good amount of practice for you to master. And I'll be honest, it's one thing to be able to do this when no one's around, but it's a totally different beast trying to pull this off successfully in hectic fights. The hardest part about doing this is our interact button on controller does like 5 different things. So if your gun needs to be reloaded while you try to do this, you can find yourself doing this successfully but ending up reloading your gun in the face of your enemy and then just being gunned down. And I know people will comment that there's a controller setting to make X for hold or tap to use, so it can be for different things, but I've tried this setting and I just don't like it. So just know that if you don't use this setting, doing the zipline interactions will be a bit more difficult. Try to always have your weapon reloaded before you go and try to do this. Now, I know flashy movement on the ziplines looks cool, but we got to talk about how some of the best movement isn't flashy. See, listen, one of the most important aspects of movement is map knowledge and knowing solid angles in any given fight. One of the keys to winning fights in the zipline buildings is constant repositioning to keep your opponents confused and isolate them one-on-one. Knowing where someone is in Apex is so powerful. That's why Bloodhound's been meta for like 5 seasons. But if they don't have a Bloodhound, constantly keeping them on their toes is pivotal to outplaying enemies. And I'm talking generally in a 1v3 scenario. Now, this movement does have a cap on it, so to speak. It won't be nearly as valuable if you're fighting a 3-stack of Apex Predators in ranked, because more likely than not, the fight that you find yourself in won't allow you to create any isolation. The fight will just go down 3v3, and you guys will either win or you'll lose. And sure, there will be some exceptions to this, but for the most part, the dynamics are going to be so much more different than a normal public match setting. The last few things I want to go over for you guys to master your movement on controller is you got to learn how to use cover in fights, something called the 50-50 rule, and learning how to strafe and crouch spam in fights. The 50-50 rule is quite simple. It's based on the premise that you should try to have 50% of your screen covered by cover in any given engagement. This can help you avoid taking unnecessary damage. It will make you a more difficult target to hit. It can give you space to reload behind that cover, and it's just overall a really smart tactic. You may think, how does movement play into this? But it's what I call simple movement. It's nothing flashy, but it's ultimately what will get the job done in a lot of situations. See, we may not be able to achieve some of the more crazy movement techniques on controller, but we do have aim assist, and I would argue aim assist is 10 times more valuable than cracked movement. Majority of fights in Apex are close range, and that's where aim assist is going to shine the most. Let's quickly go over how to crouch spam and strafe. These are 2 different valuable movement techniques that you should learn, and hopefully you can combine them in close range encounters. If you have your right stick bound to crouch like I do, it can be pretty easy to crouch up and down a few times during a fight to make you a harder target to hit, and you can use this to hip fire spray and do it strategically. Don't overdo it though. I also see newer players get stuck crouching, they never stand back up again, and this makes you a really easy target to hit because your legend is just all balled up in a condensed area. You want to incorporate the strafe in between the crouch spam to increase your movement and ultimately catch your enemies off guard. Go from left to right or far left and then far right. Just keep in mind each weapon has a different strafe speed, and I cover this more in my aim guide. I'll link it in the info card above. I forgot to ask you guys to like the video during my script, so if you wouldn't mind, if this video helped you in any way, please smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. That's going to be it for me. I'll catch you on my next upload. Peace.